It- Okay, folks, I think this is almost the last interview for the Atlanta Film Festival. And yes, I know it's being done after the fact, but good things take time. I'm here today with Aaron Strand, who is creator of this wonderful feature film called Withdrawal. But before we talk about the film, I want to talk about you. I always like starting off with a very, very important question. So, my biggest question to you is going to be this. You and I are both from Wisconsin. That's an important
Yeah.
question. In fact, you were born in Madison. So, I have to ask you this. My son is headed to UW-Madison in the fall. My heart's broken because he's going there. But tell us a bit about culture there. And also, I know it's really rich with arts and other things. Was that kind of the driving force or the beginning, let's say, of the passion you got for filmmaking? Was it there?
Hmm. Wow. So I was born in Madison, and then my parents were both university people. So I lived in and around Madison and Dane County, Greater Dane County, until I was 11 years old. And um, my budding sense of artistry certainly came from there, walking down State Street and going to
Yeah.
like all the like cool shops in the 90s and like seeing stuff. But the truth is that I was like a very scaredy kid. Like I couldn't go see a movie in a movie theater till I was like 12 years old. Like embarrassing. Like
Oh my God.
embarrassing. Yeah,
Okay.
because it was so big and overwhelming and it was like so emotionally just like overwhelming. My dad had a really big record collection, and I got into his record collection. And there was two bands that I really gravitated towards out of his record collection. That was REM and the B-52s. In fact, the B-52s were my very first concert that I ever went to. Was the B-52s in Milwaukee playing with the Go-Go's, and the opener was the Violet Femmes.
Yes.
It was the very first time I ever saw drag queen. It was a mind-altering experience. But then when I was 11 years old, my dad ironically got a job offer from the University of Georgia. So I moved to Athens, where both of
Uh-huh.
those bands were from. And I think it was really going, last few years of middle school and then throughout high school, growing up in Athens. That is really sort of where this I would credit kind of like my budding sense of artistry. So while I always have I always got the love for Wisconsin and give definitely shouts out to the Badgers. I would say that it was that move to Athens, Georgia, and really my connection to these bands that existed before I
Oh
moved
yeah.
there that kind of got my imagination fired.
I get you. Now, most people that follow me know that I'm a huge, huge Giannis fan, which means, are you a Bucks fan? Did you watch the whole playoff thing?
Oh, I listen. I am grieving with the rest of you. I've been
Right?
rooting for Giannis from the beginning. I
Yeah.
can't. I mean, you were there. You were there at his like what may be his final game as a Buck, right?
Yes. Oh, you know what? I can't diss the team because they played as best as they could. Giannis tried so hard, but without a lot of help, that's a real problem. And if it wouldn't have been 30 seconds, 7-point lead, I'd probably heal better. But I'm like, who loses with a 7-point lead in 30 seconds?
It was brutal. I mean, and look, I don't think the Dame experiment worked particularly well, but you never want to see it end the way that it did. Uh,
No.
But uh, but I do. I really want to see Giannis have an opportunity, and I think deep down, I mean, you can correct me. I think a lot of Bucks fans feel the same way that they are ready to see Giannis be put in a situation where he can succeed because I don't think the Bucks are in that position right now.
Well, I mean, I'm relatively greedy. I mean, part of me is like, do I want dude to leave? I mean, and most of you, if you don't know this, he's heavily rooted here. Obviously he's got his family that he started here, but they have the nonprofit organization that they work with and all the various things that they're both involved in. So from a community standpoint, it would be hard for him to leave, obviously. I think,
Yeah.
Dame's future and not knowing what's going on with that doesn't really help. Obviously, some of the people that are leaving the team already. Yes. So as a true fan, I would be pretty cruel if I said, listen, I just want to keep him for myself. Of course I do. But yet by the same token, I feel like the sense I get from watching and listening to everything that I have seen and heard, I'm not sure he's ready. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he's conflicted about whether he should stay or go. That's not a bad thing, which means he may not leave. I mean, I'm praying and crossing fingers. I'm also praying for the Knicks to whoop the Pacers. I'm so over Indiana now. I'm like,
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not looking good. It's
you
not
know,
looking good.
don't take my
Don't
faith
worry.
away.
Oklahoma City will heal all wounds in the finals. But
I Right.
And
I
listen,
was
but
like, oh,
we all we always have 2021.
yeah,
We always
I
have
know.
50 points in game six.
I
Okay.
know.
So
I know. It's okay. I'm fine. I'll heal. And now it's Brewer season. So I'm just like, now I'm all about the Brewers. I'm like, okay, now it's a shift and all that good stuff. As long as you don't say like you're a true blue Green Bay Packer fan, we'll be fine.
I had to separate myself
I get it.
from that bandwagon. Yeah.
It happens. I understand completely. I do. Now, along your journeys, of course, I see that you ended up at NYU Tisch, which is an amazing school, by the way, I have to say, because I'm part New Yorker. So I'm super excited that you went there, got your degree in drama. So I
Yeah.
always like to ask this question because the answer is always very different. Some directors on one page will say, love the education, would love to get more of it, definitely need it in this profession. Other side of the fence, half of my folks have literally grew up on set, so to speak, and got their education there. Looking back at it, would you have gone that same route?
Um, well, you know, I mean, it's such a hard question. I guess knowing what I know now, I certainly could have gotten the education potentially more affordably. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's really like the cost is like the biggest detractor. Look, I had an amazing experience at NYU. It's
yeah,
also somewhat complicated by the fact that like I was an arrogant little shit. Like I did not appreciate the incredible experience I was having at the time. And it
sure.
ultimately speaks back to the core issue of the film and sort of where this film came from. I arrived at NYU already a junkie. I was an active drug addict.
Yeah,
I was succeeding within my studio setting. I was working at the Box every night, the coolest nightclub in the world. And very quickly, I had all these opportunities thrown my way where I was doing off Broadway productions by my third year in school. And so I thought I was living this sort of like magical life. And frankly, at the time, I thought NYU was holding me back. Now, that was my ego talking. I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to appreciate sort of the gifts that I was being given. And
sure.
very quickly, all those gifts ended up kind of falling through my fingers like sand, and then I sort of experienced what, you know, the other side of life could really be like. So look, if I could do it all over again, I certainly would have appreciated my time a whole lot more. I just it's that cost amount that always has to
Yeah,
stick out there.
it's a killer. Let me tell you, my kid's going for astrophysics, and he had gotten accepted to one of the colleges in Illinois, was asking 60 grand a year, I think. And I thought, there's no one that can afford that. My kid is like, 20 years old, and I'm thinking, who's going to pay that for how many years? I'm like, I get the cost of
Yeah,
education, but it's like, man, when it becomes unaffordable, what are you going to do? UWM, here we come, so to speak.
yeah,
So you and I also share a commonality in that we both do podcasting because I was excited to see the podcasting thing. So talk a bit
yeah.
about how you believe podcasting has enriched your filmmaking side of things, because I think everything is relative to one another.
Oh, well, I love this question. So, look, podcasting, I was never somebody that was super comfortable on social media and never was a very good self promoter. But podcasting really gave me a reason to like put myself out there and to talk about cinema and the cinema culture that I love. So at this point, I run two podcasts. I have a film history podcast called Behind the Slate, through which I do live shows here at the Plaza Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, where I get to screen old movies. I get to do a little history podcast before the film. We then do an audience discussion after the film, and I sort of facilitate audience members talking to each other. Sometimes if there's somebody in town that's like associated with the film, we'll do a Q&A,
Okay.
which has been also really, really cool. But that it's created a way for me to sort of try to model the cinema culture that I never had when I was in my 20s, or that I just never found when I was in my 20s. Look, I spent my entire like my 20 through 30, I was just watching Criterion movies alone in the dark in my room. It was a lonely experience, you know? I'm like I
Gosh.
wasn't connecting with other people. So to provide a platform, and I've met, you know, like hundreds of other people that have had that same experience as me. So to provide a platform, a place for people to come and have these conversations and form connections and form friendships over this communal art that we all love,
Yeah.
that is so fulfilling. And ultimately, like my mission in podcasting as well as in filmmaking is really about trying to lower barriers of entry to this art form, make it accessible to as many people as possible. And I think that's the only way that we're going to sort of inspire the innovative choices and stories of the future.
Interesting question about podcasting because someone asked me this not so long ago, and it is a good question. I had a podcast. I'm now going back to it after a long time, and so there
Hmm.
are, I mean, thousands upon thousands of podcasts, and now everybody calls himself, of course, a show host because they're a podcaster, etc. So my
Yeah.
question to you is, do you feel that the term podcast host is now becoming overused, kind of like an influencer? Do you know what I mean? Because some of us really do work hard and research and we're real hosts. And then there are hosts. You get me?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always like a kind of every time I talk about being a podcast host, there is a tongue in cheek like moment.
Yep.
I mean, but ultimately, like it's I what other people's thoughts about me is like no business of mine. You know what I mean? So like I just got to be who I am. Yes, I host podcasts. I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time. I do think it is it still is an incredibly exciting medium because it's the only medium where the barriers to entry, the access is so user friendly.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the only places that we're getting sort of real authentic voices, and we can form those relationships through that medium. So yeah, I still think it's incredibly exciting, and I hope that pod in the future podcasting is not such a eye roll inducing terminology.
I agree. I do. I agree. Now, some of you may not know, but Aaron has been an actor in a total of 20 different productions. In fact, I noticed that the majority of your work has been TV acting. So I find that interesting. I'm like, was it a natural gravitation or was it just, I need a job, I'm going to TV? Everybody's got a different story. How did you end up primarily over there?
Well, that's all based on geographic. I came out of school thinking that I was going to be like a New York theater person. And that's where all
Hmm.
my early opportunities were.
Yeah.
I got these incredible gigs working in off Broadway, nightclub world. That's the person I wanted to be. I was like, I was a snob about it, and I thought, and I think that's honestly like really where my real talent as an actor kind of lies.
Yeah.
But as I've alluded to, and I speak very openly about it because it again ties to the film that I made, but it was also just my story. I had these very serious drug problems, and I had to leave New York City. I had to go back to my hometown of Athens, Georgia, and I had to get my life together. And so relocating to Georgia, I thought that I was going to kind of pick right back up where I left off, and I was going to have the success that I had before sobriety. And so I started working in the film and television industry. This was in 2013. So the
Yeah.
Georgia film and television industry hadn't even reached its apex. It was still very much on the upward climb. And so I entered into the film market here. The theater opportunities here are pretty few and far between. There's not that many equity houses. And while you can do theater, you certainly can't like put food on your table or pay your rent doing theater. So I gravitated towards the film and television and just kind of got whatever gigs that I could. But I'll tell you, and I say this just sort of in an honest assessment of the situation, I got nowhere close to the opportunities that I had before I got sober. And I could, look, ultimately, like, who knows why that was the case? Maybe I just wasn't as good as I thought I was. But I think that deep down, there was an anxious part of me that my was so insecure I felt needed to be watched, and that was a kind of this nagging insecurity that led me to want to get high in the first place. And
Okay.
as I addressed that core insecurity inside of myself and became a little bit more comfortable with who I am, I enjoyed the process of getting up in front of other people and acting less and less. And the light bulb didn't go off for me in the way that it used to. Now, I ultimately love this art form with all of my heart. And that's how this kind of long shift toward writer director began to take place because now I get more joy in watching the light bulb go on in another actor and to help another actor kind of find a character, find a through line, find a moment. That gives me infinite more joy than I ever got trying to like turn the light bulb on inside of myself. And so to say like ultimately my career as an actor, it was not one of being picky. I took whatever I could get, and the opportunities that I got just weren't what I was expecting. Certainly, 10 years ago when I was trying to rebuild my life and career.
You bet you. Now, he sounds pretty humble for a guy that's got one Best Actor nomination. Not everybody's getting nominated as an actor, so I guess you did something right, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, look, maybe I'm not shutting the door on the possibility of
Okay,
acting more in the future. I'm not in the business of kind of like really trying to define one thing or the other. I'm just like
got
everybody
it.
else, trying to make sense of the chaos of the universe and accepting that the control I thought I had when I was 20 didn't turn out at 35 now. That was not actually the case, you know?
Understood. I get it. An actor told me very recently, this is about television acting. He had said that we're all getting to a point where almost all of the network jobs will be obsolete, meaning the streamers are coming in, Netflix, Hulu, all the bigger networks, of course, and all the TVs more so on there. Do you think that that's a realistic possibility that at some given point in time, everything will almost be off of major networks and onto streamers, or the dreaded AI will take over?
I think certainly the way I mean the way that the cable bundle is experiencing this structural crisis almost for it is almost it's almost inevitable that traditional network distribution systems will slide into obscurity. And right now, people can't cover the cost of scripted drama with the mixture of cable subscriptions and advertising revenue. And so, in order for broadcast networks to survive, I do believe the sort of transition to digital space will be necessary. Now, unfortunately, the scripted drama world is facing all kinds of additional assaults, mostly in terms of the attention span of core audiences, younger audiences
Yeah.
not being raised on scripted drama, not finding value in it, and people not having because the digital landscape flattens everything so that everything is the same. The value of scripted drama is no longer as heightened as it once was. It doesn't feel as prestigious. It doesn't feel as special. It doesn't feel as unique. And this is where I think we as storytellers have a lot of work to do in terms of finding new ways to add not the superficial glitz and glamour of scripted drama and why scripted storytelling can provide this incredibly powerful emotional experience that gives meaning to our lives. We have to find new forms, new stories, new interesting ways to tell stories that compete with the Instagrams and TikToks and of a sort of more reality based, like reality television based delivery system of information and sort of moments of excitement and drama. So to answer your question, I think yes, everything is going digitally. AI is certainly coming for aspects and areas of this art form. I have still yet to see AI that I find particularly convincing or compelling in any meaningful way. It still gives me deep uncanny valley vibes, and I'm a little hesitant on the sort of like Twitter community that is so eager to declare that the age of AI has already won and has already beat out real life storytelling. It's this is not an original thought; it's a common talking point these days. But it's
Yeah.
entirely possible that the proliferation of AI, which could just sort of flood the zone with shit, might make the scripted storytelling and the actual in real life filmmaking feel that much more special. It might be a sort of like fast fashion compared to like haute couture kind of marketplace. And we could actually elevate our in real life storytelling because it's juxtaposed to this sort of like infinite flood of garbage that we will inevitably get from AI. So who knows what the future will hold, but I do think that there will be always a place for actual filmmaking.
Well put. Okay, talk to us a bit about how Stranded Entertainment came into place. When did that happen? And if I were to ask you, what's the main goal of your production company at this point?
Mm. So I started the production company Stranded Entertainment in 2017. Um, I started it because I tried to write direct a feature film in 2016 for $3,000. I tried to improvise the entire thing over the course of 2 weekends. Um, I shot the film. it had like a 30 person crew volunteer force that came out and tried to help me. I love all of them to this day. The actors, many of whom I still have wonderful relationships to this day. But I had no idea what I was doing as a writer. I knew a little bit, but I did not know how to land this plane. So that led to a year and a half, 2 years editing process where I taught myself how to use Adobe Premiere to edit this movie. And by the end of it, I couldn't land the plane. I couldn't deliver a good film. It was a case where my taste certainly outpaced my technical ability. And so, but then by this point, I kind of made this like full trend. I had just jumped in the deep end and made this transition to filmmaking. I had bought a camera to make this thing possible, and I started the Stranded Entertainment production company to start making some money on the side. And I also realized that like I've got to I gotta make some. I gotta utilize filmmaking as a way to like to just bring in some income. I was working at a grocery store, and then I was working as a delivery driver, and like I certainly didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I started the company. I started doing a bunch of commercial gigs. I made some commercials for my father-in-law, then I made some commercials for a yoga studio, and then I got hired from the Athens, like the Athens downtown local authority to make some commercials for them. And luckily, I was having fun. I was learning a lot, and I just word of mouth like kept going, and I was just able to get gig after gig after gig. Once I moved to Atlanta, that was able to continue. Stranded Entertainment is still sort of like my like money making commercial production company. I'm doing deliver low budget in house recruiting videos, internal corporate videos. I mean, we're not here to talk about all that, but that is like the actual fabric of my life as a filmmaker, and I'm not ashamed of that. I hate these filmmakers out here pretending to be something that they're not, and everybody's sort of like celebrating their like this faux image of success and not actually talking about how they survive day to day as working artists. And so all that to say is that doing the commercial work has really, really helped me in terms of implementing the story structure rules and principles that I learn like a fiend. My thirst and hunger to sort of learn more about storytelling is insatiable. And those are a great way to put those sort of lessons and rules into practice. And that's how Stranded Entertainment, my like silly production name company, continues to affect my life creatively to this day.
And you bring up a really good point. I think almost all of us are very well aware as artists that we have no choice, especially in 2025, to have a survival job. Everyone needs to have some form of something that they can rely on because the industry isn't always reliable when it comes to income and success and future and all that good stuff. Before we get into the film itself, I always think it's important to talk about you have a better half, you have a wife, and so I'm curious to ask, is she part of the industry? And then second of all, do you feel that you'll ever implement her in your projects? Because I think it's kind of a given, isn't it? We all kind of integrate our loved ones in some form or another.
Well, man, I am so lucky. I am married to my oldest best friend. I told you when I
Oh,
moved to Athens, Georgia, I showed up at seventh grade at school. I came in the middle of the year, so it was like after December break. I showed up with this weird Wisconsin accent to this very southern school. And on the very first day, I met a woman who became one of my closest friends, and eventually my wife. We went to middle school together. We went to high school together. We're the only two people from our class that went to NYU. She didn't study acting. She was a scientist all the way. She
okay.
studied science, and then we both ended up back in our hometown, and that's when we got together, started dating, got married, and now we have a 3-year-old with another kid on the way. She
Oh.
is not in the industry. She works in medicine. She is a doctor. She enables so much of the things that I am able to do with my career and with my life. And thankfully, she knows me long enough that she's incredibly supportive, and I have been able to bring her in a little bit to the not that I wouldn't say the dark side, but certainly the crazy world of making art. We co-wrote a short film together a couple years ago called The Name, which is about a white Indian couple trying to agree upon the name of our child. This was like based on our own like fights and conversations about trying to agree on a name for our daughter. And And then she served as an executive producer on Withdrawal, simply
Ah,
because, like, I, I mean, I would not, without her support, I would have not been able to devote myself to a 2 year filmmaking production
yeah.
process in the same way. So look, she will certainly be a part of everything that I do in the future, as long as as long as she keeps letting me. I mean,
Sure. So before we begin talking about withdrawal, you brought up your child, so it brings up a very interesting point. The film that you did is incredibly personal to you, obviously, and you've started talking about that. Do you feel that being candid and full disclosure with your children is something that will ever happen because of the severe?
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was first getting sober, I had to go to this outpatient rehab, which was silly, but I did it. And I'll never forget the intake interview. Someone asked me, "Do you have any family history of addiction?" And I said, "No," because we didn't talk about it. Come to find out that basically, like, every male on one side of the family has experienced drug or alcohol issues.
Jeez.
My biological grandfather on the other side, who I never knew because he wasn't present in my father's life, had alcoholism. And in this way, it's like I had genetically all the makeup to be predisposed to these problems. And I had no idea because we didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. So, yeah, I will be 100% upfront with my kids, sort of about the genetic makeup that they have, the risks involved. Ultimately, like, we can't control what other people do, but we can certainly, I think, having the tools of education and understanding sort of the stakes that are involved is essential. So, yeah, look, I've had to come to terms with the vulnerability of this type of storytelling, whether it's within my own family unit or sort of as the public facing entity of this filmmaking process. And look, there are times where that feels incredibly uncomfortable, but ultimately, I think it only does good for people to talk about what they've actually experienced, and others can do with that information what they will.
Okay. So the film is entitled Withdrawal at the Atlanta Film Festival. It had its world premiere and it also, of course, had very successful screenings, which I'm super happy about. Before talking about different elements of the film, I want to talk about two important things. When I was researching this, I came to learn that it took, is that correct, a total of 11 years of work?
Well, so no, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
Ah,
Um, I When I was first getting sober, I was trying to pour whatever was going through my brain into some sort of writing. And I started writing. I was writing about things that I had experienced in active addiction, and these ideas, and when they eventually became scripts, they weren't even scripts to start off with. Um, I've gone through so many iterations of, like, trying to tell this story and trying to find the format, trying to find the genre, trying to find the characters. So many more false starts than I could even remember over those 11 years. Once everything crystallized for me, um, which really happened in uh, November of 2022,
okay.
of sort of a contained 36-hour story. The genre is a love story between these two people, and they happen to be heroin addicts, and we're going to follow them over the course of this very tight timeline, but it's going to follow the rules of a love story. Then it was like those previous 11 years of work that I had done all felt worth it. But to say that I was, like, trying to write this specific story for 11
Yeah.
years would be inaccurate.
Okay. That's what I thought. Because when I read that, I was like, oh gosh. So I'm going to have to ask about that. Um,
Yes.
I mean, who wouldn't, right? I'm like 11 years. Is he just like carrying it around with him every day for 11 years?
That
Um,
would be crazy. Yeah.
One of the biggest topics that a lot of us as filmmakers talk about is how to finance our projects. I understand that you went the Seed and Spark route. So I have a question relative to that because a lot of filmmakers lately have been talking about how there are fewer and fewer grants. So you have to look to crowdfunding to do this. So if somebody happens to watch this today and they are trying to utilize Seed and Spark, would you recommend it? Any trips, any kind of trick or anything you learned that was a fast track to being successful there?
Yes. I had overall a very good experience with crowdfunding. It's been something
Mhm.
that I've like put off for for a long time, mostly because I knew I really only had like one big shot, to ask kind of like immediate friends and family for financial support.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make sure I took the best shot I could. And so, but a great thing, the great thing about Seeding Spark is if you can really embrace the storytelling element, you people are not just financially but emotionally invested within the project. The biggest thing that this forced me to do was to be really front facing as a filmmaker, to put myself out there and say, listen, like this is my movie, this is my story, this is why I'm telling it, and forcing me to sort of be in that position. And I had done that on an individual level when I was like fleshing out sort of the crew and the cast or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's different when you're putting it out on Instagram, on the internet, and you're having to do it every single day. I tried to attack the crowdfunding campaign with as much vigor and focus as if we were in pre-production or production of the film. I mean, it was just like a flood of content. And not only did that ultimately work in sort of spreading our film beyond the immediate circle of like our production partners,
Yeah.
but um, it it gained, it introduced the film to like a much, yeah, I mean, it introduced the film to a broader section of people. Like little bits of the reels on Instagram were starting to like get more and more views. All of a sudden it was like 8,000 views, 9,000 views, 12,000 views, and like that's when it's like really sort of taking off and expanding beyond just the world of the film. Now, look, like crowdfunding, you will hear stories about people crowdfunding projects back in 2013, 2014, and how they just went viral and like they raised so much money. And it's like, let's be real. Crowdfunding in 2025 is basically like supplemental health insurance in
Yeah.
this country. So you can't expect it to go viral in the way that like The Last Black Man in San Francisco did in 2013. But you can still do your due diligence, put your story out there, and build an engaged community that cares about the film. And that has ultimately like translated well for us, and I think it really served the project.
Sure. Now, I understand that you've partnered with Nucci Space. So I was curious to ask how that partnership came about and how are you helping one another?
Well, Nucci Space is an incredible organization here in Athens, Georgia, which is devoted to supporting mental health within the musician and artist community of Athens. It was founded by a mother whose son, Nucci Phillips, committed suicide, I think about 25, 30 years ago. And it's like a brick and mortar building, and any musician can go. They have like rehearsal spaces, they have a concert space, they do guitar lessons, and they have all these resources for artists where if you're an artist who got no money, you go there, you say I want counseling, they will set you up with counseling, and get you help. And when I came back here and I was a junkie and I needed Suboxone to function, Suboxone sort of like methadone was back in the day. This is like the
Yeah.
most standard medically assisted treatment for opioid abuse disorder. I was running out of a Suboxone subscription prescription. I was running out of a Suboxone prescription. I went to Nucci Space and they found me a doctor. And this was back in the day when doctors had to like get these special licenses to prescribe this stuff. It was
Yeah.
very, very hard. There was a whole bunch of stigma. Doctors didn't want to do it because they didn't were like, I don't want to turn my family practice into a methadone clinic full of junkies. and they found me a doctor that was like an hour away. I had to drive all the way out there to like get this prescription. It was a whole thing, but they helped me through every step of the way. They put me in counseling. They were a major resource that began my recovery journey. This was also a place that I like took guitar lessons when I was like 12 years old. Like so, like I love this institution.
Sure.
They at this point they came on and they are serving as our fiscal sponsor.
Nice.
So it's a fiscal sponsorship relationship where they basically they opened a bank account for us. They enable for us to continue to court tax deductible charitable donations. Nucci Space receives a portion of those donations, and then they hold that money for us for us to use for sort of like approved expenditures, and they also sort of serve as like a further check and balance
Okay.
for that. Now, like fiscal sponsorship is like an incredible tool throughout the fundraising space. This happened outside of our crowdfunding effort, but it allows us to continue to create a very small amount of cash flow to cover sort of certain expenses related to the distribution of the film. And
Okay.
we have our Athens premiere, which is coming up at the end of August. And actually, as soon as I'm off of this call with you, I'll be hopping on a call with Nucci Space to talk about how we can further collaborate with that Athens premiere and really sort
Okay.
of like bring this film home in the most impactful way possible.
How nice. Okay. So, one might ask this question because I asked myself this. I'm doing a very personal piece that I have written and I'm now going to film it. And I hate the idea of it because it's so close to me. And so,
Yeah.
likewise, there are some creatives that just cringe at the thought of having to look at some of their own traumas or tragedies. So, for you, talk a bit about was there mental preparation for this, or was there ever a point where you felt as though abandonment might be wise
Abandonment in terms of
of the
abandoning the
project
project.
itself? Yeah.
Um, I had this is why I say the like 11 years of prep work
Okay.
because like, well, I was not working on this script for 11 years. I was mentally preparing myself for like when I intuitively knew that it was go time on this particular story that I wouldn't blink. And once that and once that again, it just was like an inner feeling of intuition of like, no, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. In terms of the script coming together and making sense,
Yeah.
there was really no looking back. At that point, it was more about like, how do I how do I get comfortable enough sharing my own story? How do I make it concise enough that I don't end up some sort of like rambling, like crazy person as I try to like get collaborators, potential investors to
Yeah.
sort of understand sort of where I'm coming from. So really, how do I use my storytelling? How do I use these storytelling skills that I've worked on to really kind of like tighten up this pitch and make sure that it's understandable, and then also to try to like not get distracted on the story. Like this story is a very contained film. It all takes
Yep.
place mostly within a single location and over the course of 36 hours. So not getting distracted by any of the other sort of side tangents of my life. And fortunately, like I've come out of the experience, I think some people come out of their first film, telling a very personal story and it's like, oh
Hmm.
God, like, oh, what else do I tell? Like I just told the most exciting thing that happened to me. And I feel very grateful to not feel that way. I feel like I've still got a full clip, like ready to go in terms of both
Okay.
personal things that I would like to share, that I think are interesting, as well as like personal things that I can um, uh, subsume within other stories of drama that aren't necessarily quite as based on my own experience.
You betcha. When you first started looking at doing this project, were you thinking to yourself, this is going to further serve as part of my healing journey, or is it specifically set for others to heal?
This is specifically for others. I was not thinking about this being a sort of not to say that anyone going into a project like this would necessarily be self-indulgent, but
Yeah.
I was very trying to be very conscious. Like, this is not about me. In the same way that like the film, this is this is not my life on screen. This is not an autobiographical
Right.
film. The characters exist on their own accord, and the drama should play
Yeah.
out, outside of Aaron Strand. I would love for people to watch the movie and not think about me at all. And that focus on others and what are others going to get out of this? How are others going to relate to it? That's really where I think the best work for me happens. Um, and and that was like implicit within the pitch to even just getting the other actors on board, the other filmmakers, the team on board, was going to them and saying, not just even about sort of like addiction issues, but sort of going to every single person, say, what are your goals? What are you trying to do in this business? What are you trying to do artistically? What do you feel like is not being fulfilled right now? And this film and this project, because let's be real, like I can't pay you a union rate. I can't pay you what you're worth, but I'm going to try to supplement that gap in pay with meaning, with respect, with consideration. I am taking it on my personal responsibility that you, Grip, you makeup artist, leaves this set feeling like I took a step forward in my artistic career today in a way that you don't working in sort of big budget television and film, where you're
Yeah.
just totally like a cog in the machine. And I'm so sick of walking off of sets being like, what did I even do? And like, I feel like shit leaving this job that I supposedly love. And so try, really being making that promise. And then once you make the promise, like having to live up to it. So that focus on other people's experience is not just like hewn into the sort of storytelling, but was
Mhm.
also like fused into our production. And I think that ultimately translates to the screen.
And we don't have obviously the lead characters here. So maybe I can ask you this, meaning the actors themselves. I was
Yeah,
curious while I was watching it. There's a lot of stretching that I feel that they do. Obviously, there are dark moments. There are moments of revelation. There are moments of light. There are moments of dark, very dark, lots of anger and lots of heat and hate. Mental preparation, did they talk to you at all about or did you see their process of how they put this together? Because that's a lot to take on in a short amount of time that you're playing out on screen.
absolutely. Well, we worked on it together. We rehearsed for over 4 months building up to the very first shooting block.
Okay.
So we built that together. They came over to my living room about twice a week for months at a time, and so in that way, I think for them it was ultimately like a really fun experience to access those emotions. We did it in as open and safe and supportive a space as possible.
Yeah.
Um, we really formed a relationship like between the three of us, and we're able to sort of talk about these things and build up the trust that is required to access these things safely and also authentically, because it's so unfair in the world of film that you just drop people into these environments and expect them to sort of deliver, and also just like you lose the fun of the rehearsal process. Like I love
Yeah.
rehearsal. Like it's fun. It's like we should enjoy doing this. And luckily, I found two actors. I mean, I was very upfront with them from the beginning. Like this is the process I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
are you down for that? Like, are you excited by that? And I found two people who were like, yes, yes, and yes. Of course, we didn't, went even a step further. We worked with an amazing intimacy coordinator here, named Christina Arjona. She came to rehearsals as well as being present
Okay.
on set. So for certain sort of intimacy elements, we had that sort of extra person. Everybody had an incredible experience with her, and so yeah, it was a lot of care, consideration, and ultimately like fun. I mean, that's the best part about acting, right? Is that you get to like just dredge your soul, but then later you're like, yeah, like I did that. Like that was fun.
See all this excitement he's got. When I watched it, I didn't really have that. That was not my response. I mean, your film is incredibly touching. It's incredibly sad. It's very hard on the soul, so to speak. I think most of us who've ever dealt with people who've had addiction issues before, one of the things you learn, which are good about presenting within the course of this film, are the two sides that you see of a person. You love both of them, but it's so difficult to love the part that is addiction. When someone is actually held within that addiction, they become a different person, which I think people don't really realize about that. They also, of course, bargain and the whole just the whole dynamic of how a relationship can be so beautiful and yet so toxic at the same time is so very well played out. The other thing is the writing. I have to say, the two biggest things that stood out to me, these lines in particular, the junkies don't have friends. Oh, it just makes your heart want to cry when you hear that. It's like most of us want to take this moment when we see someone who's in the throes of addiction, but it is also very, very true. The second one, are you a vampire? And that stood out to me. I was like, it totally, I'm like, that's always the sign of a good film. It all starts with the good storytelling, the good lines and the ones that are written, especially ones that are so relatable. I wish that addiction was not a relatable subject to any of us at this point, but you hit the nail on the head. The other thing that we take away from this, at least most of us that have watched this, is seeing the correlation with a broken parental relationship, and that kind of being one of the many reasons for having an issue with addiction. When you sat down with this and looked at all of this, were there any concerns about those still in addiction watching this? Does that make sense? Meaning, if you have an audience of people currently using, how will this play out to them? And what sort of reaction might there be, like an unfavorable one?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a big concern in that like being a, you know, not active but a junkie myself, when I watch films about that are supposed to be about addiction but like aren't really real, I get offended because
Yeah,
that's not how it really is. So my number one concern was if people who have firsthand experiences in addiction or are currently in active addiction, I want them to be able to watch this film and be like, fuck yeah, like that's what it's like.
yeah,
That's what it's really, really like. If people, I mean, ultimately, like, do people, I never want to create from a place of like, is this going to offend somebody? Is this going to like, because like people get bothered for like infinite reasons that you can't predict. But
yeah.
but everybody can have the universal experience of like, this is truthful to me. And so that was a major focus for me. Um, as always, like as an artist, there's always like things that you think you could have done better. But it has been so assuring and so it has meant the most to me that of the people that have seen this movie either at home or on the big screen, the ones who have the firsthand experience with addiction coming back and saying, I have never seen my story represented this way. I have never seen the struggle to get on medically assisted treatment represented this way.
Yeah.
I've never seen the fact that when you're withdrawing from opiates, that diarrhea is a major concern, like represented in this way on screen. I have never seen the humor as part of the junkie withdrawal experience represented it on screen, and
Yeah.
and that's something that I also want to highlight because um, that I think that humor, yes, the film has these sort of it can be heavy, but there are also moments of levity, and we try to install these release valves to give the audience places to sort of laugh and catch their breath and release the tension. And that is all very true to sort of the junkie experience. Like it's absurd the things we do and the lives we lead. And so to give people sort of a something to identify with and laugh about has been so affirming. So, those connecting with that community and really trying to make sure that the film could resonate with that community was a major, major, major focus. And so far, the response has been overwhelming, and I'm just so grateful that the film has been able to find those people, and I hope that it's able to find a lot more.
And it's interesting to hear that too, because I was reading a couple of different reviews and just feedback that was said or printed about your film. And someone had mentioned how you're seeing the very darkest parts of addiction, which is true. But yes, the levity is super important and the realities of the certain things that you have to struggle with while you're in that predicament. Is it your hope eventually, or have you considered the idea of taking your film to government organizations or to medical practitioners or to people out there and say, hey, take a good look at this. Now, what can we do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my personal sort of long-term plan for distribution on this film is a self-distribution strategy
Yeah.
where we will be really honing in on screening opportunities that connect directly with the harm reduction community, the prevention community, the addiction recovery community, the medical community, and yes, the government institutions that are supporting aspects of this work, whether it's to arrange screenings or simply for awareness in that, like you were describing. That's going to be our major focus in the work going forward.
Okay, you've gotcha. Would this also include homeless communities? Because there seems to be a big correlation, or so we hear oftentimes, that homeless can struggle with being addicted to any substance in particular.
I mean, listen, I'm not. I would never discriminate against that overlap, and certainly many of our harm reduction partners that the organizations that have helped at various points with fundraising efforts for the film, or have just sort of lent their support and expertise to the filmmaking. Luckily, they serve such a wide array of sort of clientele, and while there are all sorts of like crossovers within that clientele, so we will certainly gain access to those communities and sort of have opportunities to introduce them to that film. um, uh, like, as my number one concern is like putting this film in touch with people who have firsthand experience with addiction, either as addicts themselves or whose family members experience addiction, and they've watched it through that lens. And I hope to just reach as broad of that audience as possible, and sort of no discrimination from the person from the CEO popping pills prescribed to their doctor to the person on the street, just trying to get a point. This film, I do think, has something to say to all of those people, and that's the beauty in this horrible thing that is so prevalent in American society, is that it really does not discriminate, and neither do we.
So I've been asking most filmmakers to take two sentences and to describe to everyone what your film is about. So in only two sentences, what is Withdrawal?
Withdrawal is a raw and harrowing exploration of two lovers trying to survive a night of heroin withdrawal. And it is a portrait of the modern opioid epidemic and all of the heartache, hurt, and humor that comes with it.
Nicely done there. If folks are going to want to see it in the near future, where are you headed next before Georgia?
Yeah, so we next week on June 6th, we are making our New York City premiere at the Art of Brooklyn Film Festival. I'm super excited. I've had a wonderful experience with them thus far. We'll be playing at the Stewart Cinema in Greenpoint, a wonderful little 50-seat cinema in Greenpoint, one of my favorite neighborhoods. So I can't wait to get up there, and I'll be there for a while, sort of trying to experience as much of the festival as possible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Stewart Cinema, June 6th, Friday, June 6th at 7 p.m. We'll be there. And then after that, we will be heading back to my hometown of Athens, where the film was shot, for the Athens Film Festival. That'll be on Friday, August 15th. I'm not exactly sure. We don't have a start time quite yet.
Sure.
And we'll be doing our Athens sort of like hometown premiere, which will also be very exciting. So those are the two things that we got immediately in the future.
Cool. Now, before I ask you about future projects, I don't want to forget to ask this very important question. If
Mhm.
someone happens to watch this today who is still in the throes of addiction, what would you say to them?
I would say to them that help is available. Um, then that doesn't necessarily mean that like you have to give up your lifestyle today. Like, harm reduction saves lives. Syringe exchange saves lives. Not using alone saves lives. There is a community of people that can help you without ever sort of pushing any sort of agenda or expectation on what your life may or may not look like. There are people that genuinely just want to see you survive until tomorrow and help you do that. You do not have to suffer alone. You do not have to use alone, and you don't have to die alone. And our overall focus as a country, when it comes to addiction resources should really be about making sure that people have access to these resources so that they can live and maybe have a chance of doing something else tomorrow, rather than the sort of punitive punishment of the incarceration system that has statistically shown to not improve health outcomes. So I would say to reach out and get in touch with any of these organizations. We are compiling a list through the film of organizations. Certainly, if you're in Georgia, or the greater Atlanta area, the Georgia Harm Reduction Coalition is the first place you can go to, which has more resources than I could even begin to list in a single sentence available to you, all for free. Um, and that and I just hope that people seek out these resources because they are available and they do save lives.
Thank you. According to my roster here, it looks like your upcoming project is Sleeping Forest. Does that sound correct?
Um,
That's what's listed, Aaron.
that's what's listed.
Yes. I guess it's not happening. Uh-oh.
Um,
So for upcoming projects, Aaron, do we have any?
oh my goodness. Yeah. So okay. So upcoming projects.
Yeah.
Um, I am currently in development on a slate of feature films that I will be sort of announcing in more detail in the near future.
Okay.
Me, along with some of my closest collaborators in here in the state of Georgia, we want to continue to be telling these very pressing stories about the modern American world, dealing with sort of the real issues of modern American life. Is not necessarily limited to drug addiction, but we are focused on creating low budget, independent feature films about the real modern world, not hiding behind genre, IP, or frankly oversaturated high contrast Netflix color palettes. And that is our number one focus of what we are trying to build here. We want to bring a new level of storytelling and immediacy in terms of dramatic storytelling to this film market. As Andre 3000 once said, the South's got something to say, and we certainly feel the same way.
Nice. Very nice. If folks want to find you on social media, what's the best way to do that?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram at Stranded on Stage. You can also follow Withdrawal on Instagram at Withdrawal Film. You can also connect with me through my podcast, which is very active on both Instagram and TikTok at Behind the Slate Pod on both Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, so any of those handles, you can definitely get a hold of me.
And can people actually listen to the podcast? I know you talk about doing it live, but are there archive versions that they can hear?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can search
Okay.
Behind the Slate wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or on all the
Cool.
things.
Wonderful. Before we wrap this up, this is what I want to say to you as the interviewer. First off, thank you so much for being so patient and waiting for me so we could get this done. But more importantly, I don't think filmmakers or actors hear this often enough. So I make it a point to finish my interviews with just this. One of the most beautiful things about withdrawal is not only your own candid nudity, so to speak, to be able to share parts of your experience, but the bigger thing is that you've taken to doing a labor of love, which will in essence help thousands, countless numbers of people who are oftentimes as addicted, never seen. Their faces aren't seen, their voices aren't heard, and their needs don't matter. But you've made all that a priority. And so for that, I thank you on behalf of probably thousands and thousands of people across the world.
Thank you.
Absolutely.